The price you pay for a car isn't necessarily an indication of how well you're going to look after it. Some people buy a car for a couple of $100s and look after it like their life depends on it. Other people spend more than $1 million on a car and leave it on the side of the road like a discarded piece of chewing gum. Some of the cars that have been abandoned or simply forgotten about over the years are totally amazing, as you're about to find out by watching this video. It's hard to say whether Richard Scaldwell's JAP V8-powered GN cycle car is an abandoned vehicle or whether it's just made out of abandoned vehicles. It's said that it took Richard more than 15 years to put the car together, starting in 1985 and finishing in the year 2000. Several of the parts in the car are over 100 years old, and the JAP V8 engine is of the type that was used in early aircraft. Only 4 of them are believed to have survived into the modern age. It's thought that this is the last fully operational example of this type of car anywhere in the world. The rest are either in museums or broken down to the point where they're little more than scrap metal. Richard raced the car for a little while, but it reached the point of being more than a century old, and he decided it would be more responsible to treat it as an antique. And so now it very rarely moves anywhere. We suppose that this isn't a true abandonment. It's just kind of moving on to that next phase of its existence. Of all of the places that long-forgotten cars turn up, barns are the most reliable and most consistent. You never know what might be hiding inside a barn that hasn't been looked in for a while. You might find a 1924 Ford Model T Roadster, for example. This vehicle, discovered in November 2019, is understood to have been in storage for little more than half of a century. 50 years in a barn in Torrington, Connecticut, USA hasn't done too much harm. It's still in surprisingly good condition and can even be driven, although it needs a little care and attention to get it back to optimum levels of performance. Only the top of the car is looking worse for wear, everything else is remarkably well kept, and it doesn't even have any significant signs of rust. In 4 years' time, this Roadster will be celebrating its 100th birthday, so long as its next owner keeps it in just as good a condition as the last one did, even if they never drove it. We expect that it will live to see 100 and beyond. You can tell that there's a financial and historical value to a 1924 Ford from just looking at it, but you'd struggle to identify the reason why this Ford Mustang sold for $3.74 million in January 2020 just from looking at it. It's impossible to guess, so we'll just tell you. It's the same car that was driven by Steve McQueen in the movie Bullitt. The car, which at heart is just a plain old 1968 Ford Mustang GT, is now believed to be the most valuable car of its type in the world. What makes the sale of the car even more surprising is that for many years it seemed to vanish from the face of the earth. It was used by a Warner Brothers employee as a commuter car after filming wrapped on the movie and was then sold to a man named Robert Kiernan. From there it disappeared, and not even Steve McQueen could find it, despite publicly saying he'd pay big bucks to buy it in 1977. The car eventually turned up again in a near derelict state in 2008 and spent 10 years going through refurbishment to get back into its current movie-ready condition. Our next car is one that comes with a story. You've probably never seen anything that looks quite like this round-door RollsRoyce, and that's because it's totally unique in the world. Although it looks like it could be a cutting-edge modern vehicle, it was actually built around an extremely well-polished 1925 Phantom 1 chassis paired with a cabriolet body. Once upon a time, it was owned by a Mrs. Hugh Dillman of Detroit, Michigan, USA, but despite documents confirming her ownership, the car was never exported to America. It was instead sold to an owner in India, and then by the early 1930s, it was in Belgium. That's where, in 1934, it was given a new body by a Nokier body company in Roseland, the same body it still has today. The fact that it survived this long is a near miracle. In the early 1950s, it was rescued from a scrapyard in New Jersey, where it had been abandoned by an unknown owner. It was then painted an obnoxious shade of gold and passed off as the former car of British King Edward VIII. Fast forward to 1991, and a Japanese collector will buy it for over $1.5 million, then leave it in storage for a decade, the car's second abandonment. Since then, it's been owned by the Peterson Museum, and it's finally in safe hands. In December 2019, the rest of the world found out about a secret that had been known to the users of a car park in Atlanta, Georgia, USA for some time. There's a super rare GM EV1 abandoned inside there, and from the looks of things, it's been there for a long time. The EV1 could be considered the first commercially viable electric car ever created, but GM decided to kill their own creation and recalled all 1,117 models of it from the leaseholders who were driving them. It would appear that not every single leaseholder obeyed that instruction. Perhaps it's been left in the car park as an act of protest. We guess that it's been there for a minimum of 5 years based on the state of the tires and the thickness of the dust that's built up on the hood. One possible explanation for its presence is that GM donated approximately 20 of the cars to educational institutions rather than scrapping them. And there's such an institution not far from this car park. Could it be that school has no use for it anymore, so they left it to rot? Back in 2012, classic car collectors all over the world fixed their eyes on a mystery one that brought with it an opportunity to pick up a classic car at a knockdown price. In England, a mansion in Staffordshire was repossessed when the occupier fell behind with their rental payments. When the authorities came to claim the property, they found that the owner had fled, and they'd left behind no less than 105 American and British cars, including some highly collectible models like Triumph Stags, Humber Scepters, and Jensen Interceptors. All of the cars were taken into storage, but the evicted tenant faced a bill of more than $100,000 to cover the cost of their recovery or storage. If they didn't pay, the cars would go to auction. Inevitably, they didn't pay. That meant the whole fleet, including a Porsche 911, a 100-year-old Ford Model T, 2 Lancia Fulvias, and an Escort RS 2000, went under the hammer at an auction house. We don't know where all the cars are now, but this has to be one of the most senseless cases of vehicle abandonment of all time. Why not just sell a few of the cars and pay the rent that way? No, your eyes do not deceive you. Yes, this really is a Toyota Supra racing car, and yes, it really is being used as a makeshift flower bed, according to the people who live close to the place that these pictures were taken. The 1999-built Toyota Supra GT500 JGTC Racer has been in that exact same spot for at least 15 years. It's a far cry from its halcyon days when it was achieving podium finishes at Fuji Speedway with Yuji Tachikawa at the wheel. The sponsor of the team who was racing it changed in the year 2000, and the new sponsor wanted to get rid of the car, but nobody could be persuaded to take it because of its high fuel consumption and maintenance costs. That allowed a couple who manage a humble store in Japan to claim it free of charge and position it outside their shop to attract customers. Because the car isn't running, the maintenance costs are minimal. Every so often, someone comes along and offers to buy it from them, but they insist it isn't for sale at any price. Buying a classic car can be very expensive, even if the car in question has been abandoned for years, which is why we like this next idea so much. In late 2019, 36 vintage Corvettes were discovered in a series of garages in Manhattan, New York, USA. According to reports, they'd been standing there for decades. Instead of selling them off to the highest bidder one at a time, a company called Corvette Heroes is disposing of them in a raffle, and all of the proceeds go to charity. There's one Corvette for every year of production between 1953 and 1989, and each Corvette has been confirmed as abandoned. Here's the twist, though. All 36 of them have been given away as a single collection before. A man in Long Island won the collection in a competition in 1989 and handed them on to an artist called Peter Max. Max had them stored in a range of different garages and never touched them or thought of them again. With Max now in poor health, it's been agreed that the Corvettes can be given away once more, perhaps making them the ultimate garage collection discovery. When the country of Greece suffered severe financial difficulties in 2009, it had a knock-on effect on many of the country's industries and businesses. One of them was the Organization for Public Property Management, which was responsible for the auction of anything from unwanted property to unwanted vehicles, including luxury cars confiscated from criminals. The organization was making huge losses at the time of the recession and was ordered to be closed down to prevent further loss to the public purse. But the closure meant that there was nobody to handle the auction of all the property they took care of. As a result, by 2012, there were thousands of cars piled up in warehouses, worth millions of dollars when added together, but going nowhere because nobody could sell them. The fate of the vehicles is unclear. The longer the delay went on for, the less valuable the cars would become, and the harder it would be to find buyers for them. Perhaps they're still there, in their forgotten warehouses. When Prince Philip of England came to visit Bucharest in Romania in 2001, it was a big deal for the city. They rolled out the red carpet for the visiting royal and made sure that all of his transport arrangements involved the use of luxury cars. It was therefore highly embarrassing when the Daimler DS420 they'd procured especially for him failed to start after being parked below the Bucharest International Hotel. In fact, Bucharest officials were so embarrassed by it, they washed their hands of it, and it's been stuck below the hotel gathering dust ever since. The British consulate has refused to take the car back, and the hotel has shown no interest in forcibly removing it from their property. If the presumably trivial technical issue that stopped it from starting in 2001 can be fixed, and it's given a good clean, it's probably worth around $70,000. We realize that if you drive your car off the side of the road and land at the bottom of a gulch, your first priority will be ensuring that you and your passengers are okay. You might even want or need to visit a hospital. Having done that, you should probably then come back and retrieve your car, especially if that car is a valuable Honda S2000, like the bright red one sticking out like a sore thumb at the bottom of a gulch in Azusa, California, USA. The car was more than 100 feet off California State Route 39 and seemed to show the telltale signs of a bumpy landing, but nothing so severe that the driver would have been badly injured. It's therefore a complete mystery why they chose to run away and abandon their car. But we believe it was later retrieved from its predicament by the Angeles National Forest Service. Given that dragging it back out of the gulch probably damaged it further, it would likely become a restoration job for its next owner. Whether or not this next discovery should be counted as a car is debatable, so we'll leave it up to you. It's sort of a prototype hovercraft built in 1958 by the Curtiss Wright Corporation of Woodbridge, New Jersey, USA. It's in a dreadful state, but the person who was in possession of it back in 2015, when it was being offered for sale on eBay for $100,000, claims to remember seeing it in action during their youth and even claimed there's enough of it left for a full restoration to take place. The company that built it hoped that the military would be interested in their invention, but it was deemed to be too slow and too impractical, so it was consigned to the trash bin of history. It must have been abandoned for decades for it to get into this state, but it presumably now has an owner who appreciates it as a historical curiosity. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.